The tabletop takeaway.
Game mechanics on display.
Three designers share the stage.
Pick a genre and we'll play.
The tabletop takeaway.
Welcome back to the Tabletop Takeaway. I'm Ananda Gunaratna.
I'm Charlie McCarran.
And I'm Trevor Muller-Hagel.
And today we're going to start our new series on roll and write games, beginning with That's Pretty Clever, which is a dice game, as roll and write games generally are. You have in this game you have 6 dice, each one of a different color: yellow, orange, white, purple, blue, green, one of each. And on your turn, you roll all of the dice, and you choose one to keep, and then based on the color of die that you keep, you check off a box on your personal score pad, or you might write a number in a box, in the matching color. And each color has a different way to score. So, for example, the orange boxes are pretty simple. You write down the number on the die in the box, and then at the end of the game, it's worth that many points. Whereas the yellow color, there's a grid of numbers, and when you take a yellow die, you cross off a matching number in the grid, and then if you fill out a row or column, you get a reward. But what makes the sort of twist in all of this is that when you pick one of these dice that you just rolled, all of the dice that you rolled that are less than the value of the one you took go on a tray in the middle of the table. And this is so. For example, if you pick a 4, you would put any 1s, 2s, or 3s on the tray. And the reason that this is important is because, first of all, after you're done taking dice, other players are going to use the dice on the tray that you didn't take. But also, can take up to 3 dice. So if, for example, you take a 6 first and then just lose all the other dice, then you don't get any more for your turn. Because you can take a maximum of 3, but only if there are actually dice to re-roll. And then on the sheet, in addition to points, there are also various bonuses. So some of the bonuses let you check off or write a number in a specific box. Some of them will let you re-roll the dice. Some of them will let you copy a die that someone else has rolled. And after the active player has chosen up to 3 dice over several rolls, the other players, the passive players, each get to pick one of the dice from the tray that the active player didn't take. And that's basically the game. You go a set number of rounds, and then count up points at the end of the game. There's also foxes. So foxes they're like little fox head symbols. They're a very special reward, which gives you points for whichever color you have the fewest points in, which is an incentive to try to keep all of the 5 different colors balanced. I say 5 colors. There are 6 dice, 5 colors. That's because one of the dice is white, which is wild. You can use it as any color. That's basically the game, and it's pretty good. It looks pretty simple at first. You roll a bunch of dice, you check them off, sort of like Yahtzee. But the whole play around having to get rid of dice that are less than the one that you pick creates some really interesting situations.
Oh yeah.
Now in roll and write games, I think take that mechanics. You don't often have many of those. In this game, there are actually ways to go after other players because, for example, let's suppose you roll a bunch of 1s and then a higher number, right? Now, you might be tempted to think, well, okay, I should just take one of the 1s because then I can re-roll all the rest of the dice and maybe get something better. And that's true, but the other thing you could do is you could take one of the higher numbers. And I should mention, in this game, generally larger numbers are better for a variety of reasons.
Most of the time.
Most of the time you want large numbers. But, so in this scenario, let's suppose you take one of the higher numbers and then put a bunch of 1s out on the tray. Now, you're going to get to roll fewer dice on your second roll, which may not be great because it gives you fewer options. But all of the other players are going to have to take those 1s. Whereas if you take a 1 and then re-roll, you might get larger numbers like 2s or 3s or 4s or something, and then other people could get those. So it is possible in this game to play in a way, in such a way as to deprive other players of options, or you can ignore that entirely and just.
Play it more like multiplayer solitaire and
but there is sort of a take that ish aspect, but it's a light take that. You're not attacking other players. You're just deliberately depriving them of resources that they would otherwise get.
For instance, one of the things you have is that you can re-roll dice.
Yes.
You get to keep a number of dice for that re-roll. So you could keep the worst dice that you don't want, that you know they don't want too, and re-roll everything else so you know that they're going to get the bad dice, which we did to each other several times.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty interesting,
Yeah. I didn't think there was going to be so many layers of strategy to it.
Yeah.
Like I kind of
it's
in
pretty
my
clever.
head,
it is pretty clever.
In my head, I kind of had it. So like the game Quicks is kind of a simple version of roll and write, where it's a little bit like That's Pretty Clever, where you're just 4 different colors and you're trying to kind of like fill in a row of numbers.
Oh, sure.
And you have to start with as low as you can and get and so on. But that's like only one piece of this game, and then this game has like many more things on it. So I thought that was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it packs a lot into a relatively small number of rules.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the big selling points for it is how you can combo into other sections, which it's a little bit more of like the advanced feeling of the game. But as you fill in, let's say, green, you're able to unlock other boxes being filled in other zones, like yellow or purple.
Yes.
And that's being able to see that and make those connections, and then like, oh, I'm just one away from getting this. I'm going to use this ability to get me one more, which will get me that dice, which will get me another thing there. And then like, you're feeding through these combos in your head. And it's like, oh, that's really satisfying. And it makes you feel clever.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, and the combos are useful for getting you past certain boxes that are very hard to check off.
Right.
For example, in the blue category, you add the blue and white dice together, and 2 of the boxes you have to check off there are the 2 and the 12. Well, the 2 is not actually that. I mean,
it's not too crazy.
Yeah, it's unlikely. Obviously, there's a 1 in 36 chance of rolling a 2 on 2 dice, but since players tend to discard the low dice, it's not that unlikely. But the 12, I mean, getting a natural... Actually, Trevor, I think you got a natural 12 in our game.
Yeah, I think so.
Just from the dice. But...
not unlike the probability farming games we played.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you want to get that 12, you're probably going to have to get it as a reward. Unlock... you have to make a mark in one of the boxes that lets you mark off a blue box as a reward.
Yeah.
And when I'm playing, I definitely plan around that.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm excited for this Roll and Write series because it's making me realize like how many push your luck elements are in these games.
Yeah.
Not only the dice rolling in this one, like, ooh, do I hope for the best on my next roll, but every one of these 5 areas has some element of a push your luck, like, oh, do I wait? When do I like use a number here versus over here, and hope for like a good roll of that color
and
in
so,
the future? Like
purple, you're progressively getting higher for that row until you hit a 6, and so it's like, oh, I could put a 4 there, but that means I'm only gonna be able to put another number if it's a 5 or a 6. I can't put any other number in purple. So like, you're really kind of having to hedge your bets a little bit of where you want to choose to go.
Yeah. Which is made even more risky by the fact that a lot of the numbers that you're going to be putting there are numbers that other people have put out on the tray.
Right.
So like if you're stuck with you've got your 4, and then the numbers that come out, maybe they're like a purple 1 and I don't know, a green 1 and
a yellow 2.
And a yellow 2, and you've already checked off all the yellow 2s, and you can't put down the green and you can't put down the purple. Well,
SOL.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think there's something really satisfying in this game too, that when your plan pays off.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of a plan it is, but it still unlocks that feeling.
Yeah.
As a human of like satisfying this, I checked all the boxes, and you combo things later in the game. So it's a nice progression starts out pretty simple, and as we get going, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has an element of planning, and sometimes they don't pay off. Like I had, all I needed a blue 7, and that would have completed a row and a column in blue, getting me 2 other check marks.
Also points.
It would have been so good.
And like 10 points.
And it's a 7,
right?
And 7 is the most commonly rolled number on 2 dice, but I just could not get it.
Yeah.
And I ended the game without that, and
Trevor won, and that was just
Trevor won.
Really hard.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot.
It's been a while since we beat Ananda in a game, though. I think,
especially using probabilities.
Yeah, it's I guess one thing I really, I guess maybe it's my takeaway. I'll hop in with it. Is the foxes, because this fox element, it basically makes you succeed in all areas of your score sheet, all different colors. And I was definitely aiming for that. And I think that is really the magic of this game, because otherwise you'd probably just try to max out in one color.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
And so, it makes me want to do some scoring element like this in a game.
Yeah. I'll say just for the benefit of people who haven't played the game, 3 of the 5 colors have... Well, actually, no, I guess yellow doesn't. 2 of the 5 colors have sort of triangular-ish scoring progressions, green and blue, where the amount of points that you get increases the further you get, the more boxes... just sort of escalates more and more.
Yeah, so if there wasn't this fox element, you'd be more tempted to just go for those colors.
You just max green and blue.
Well, I want 11 more points with this one dice, so I'm going to do that. Versus a fox, which could give you 30 points because you have 20 somewhere else. That's your lowest, and it's crazy how much it can go. And I was 2 squares away from getting 2 more foxes, and I was so excited to try to get that, but...
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. The fox makes the player engage with all of the colors rather than ignoring some of them.
Right.
And I guess a similar way to something like yellow and Yangtze makes you care about all the different colors.
Yeah, scoring your lowest of the colors. Yeah, that's a great mechanic.
Yeah, it is a good way to get people to engage with all parts of the game.
And also, just to add into that, the white die being wild does the same thing in a way, because it gives you more options for each color. So you're not necessarily as blocked out of a place, especially when you're the active player. And so it's nice having that extra wild along with having these objectives you're trying to reach. Because it gives you that little extra fuel to make progression along any track.
Yeah. Yeah, having that wild die there is
if it was just 5 dice and you're using those, it would be a very different game, and I don't think it would be as fun.
The white die also gives more options to the passive players because, of course, they're stuck with whatever dice the active player throws away. But quite often, the white die is among those. Even though it's wild, there are times when you get a really good roll on a specific color, and then you have to throw away the wild, and then... Yeah.
There is one mechanic we haven't actually mentioned, which is one of the abilities, which is the cloning.
Yes.
And that is...
Which strictly speaking, I don't think that's
it's not called cloning.
It's not called... I call it cloning, but I think the rule book calls it something else.
Basically, at the end of the active player's turn, you can spend it to use any of the dice, whether they're on the platter or in that player's tableau, we'll say, or on their sheet. Yeah. So it really can open up, I really need that yellow 6...
Yeah.
Perfect. I have the yellow 6. Now I get an extra fox at the end of the game. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this game's nice about there's multiple ways to accomplish something, even if the dice don't work out in your favor.
Right.
So I think that is kind of great to have in any game using dice, really.
Yes.
Some sort of
that mitigation.
Dice mitigation.
Yeah, dice mitigation.
But feeling clever about... Oh, but if I do this, then I can cross off this.
Oh, and that will get me a green, and that green
area
will get me a blue, and that blue will get me... Oh, my God!
It does a very good job of making you feel pretty clever.
Yeah. And there's bonuses everywhere. For example, I didn't even notice that there's a diagonal bonus on one of these corners.
Yellow,
Trevor helped me out. And
it's you also are going to get that +1. Oh, God! Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I guess one thing we haven't talked about yet is... Now, obviously, this is the first game we're talking about in this series.
Right.
But I guess mild spoiler alert. Roll and write games are typically fully simultaneous, I think. Right?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential for them to be. So the next one we have is going to be Three Sisters.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of turn order, but you can basically declare, I'm going to do this.
Oh,
and then the
okay.
next person can choose, and you can resolve your sheet
Sure.
as it's happening. So there's...
All right. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
maybe I'm
But-
wrong on that, but...
I would say there's, in almost all of them, there's some element of
Right.
simultaneous play.
Right. And there's a little bit of that here, too.
Oh, yeah.
In that, the passive players all go at the same time after the active player is done, but they do have to wait until the active player finishes.
Does all three of their dice placements.
Yeah.
Does all three of the dice placements, which can take sometimes a while.
Especially
Yeah.
if they're comboing and doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Or planning.
Like
Well,
what?
Yeah.
Like when I think about roll and write games, one of the advantages I see to them is low downtime, and this game does have a fair bit of downtime, but I don't know. I don't feel like it's that bad in this case because, I mean, one of the things it lets you do is sort of show off how clever you are as
Right.
the active player.
Or
Yeah.
how nervous you are if you're not really sure what you're doing and you're trying to make good choices. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of these roll and write boxes say like 1 to 100 players.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
and it's a great advantage. And I remember talking with Adam of Adam's Apple Games. He did these online game nights that was just going to be roll and write games, and it's great for that because anyone who joins, and I ended up teaching his game Truck Off Roll and Write to my class, and it was like, okay, let's see how we could all play as a class.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had to change one rule about re-rolling because some re-rolling power required the first player. But
yeah.
I was like, okay, well, we'll just pick,
Well, and Jamie Stegmeyer of Stonemaier Games also has Rolling Realms, which
Oh, okay.
I believe is a similar thing where you can actually, they were meeting up regularly and doing like an online play of it, and he would roll the dice or whatever it is.
Yeah.
yeah.
But
It's sort of a trade-off too. Like you said, though, it is nice to have a first player, especially in this game. You need it, but
well, and this game is the interaction too.
Right.
Right.
Like if you're thinking about what your opponents need, then you can definitely choose dice that will make things very hard for them.
Right, yeah.
It's interesting that in a genre where lots of games are 1 to 100, this game is very specifically 1 to 4. It caps out at 4,
Yep.
which is not even that high of a player count.
Yeah.
Generally.
Despite having
interesting.
unlimited number of sheets you could tear off and play together,
Yeah.
I think it's all about the number of rounds and how many points you can get per round and making sure you feel that like, if I could just get that one more square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say I like that. I'm slightly biased in that I am generally against games padding their player count. So I definitely respect a game that's like, nope, this
This is fun at 4
yes,
and no more.
and that's that's where we're
Yeah.
where we're cutting it off.
Well, so I was just thinking, talking about simultaneous play. Yahtzee, one of the originators of this genre, does not. You take turns.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Yahtzee has no
Yeah.
following at all.
Yeah, so it does make me wonder what was the first roll and write. Maybe we'll research that before.
Using this kind of mechanic, like where you have
Yeah, other people can use the dice too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and in this one, they're using specifically the dice that you don't use, as opposed to like I roll a die and everybody uses that value.
right, which is more true with the probability farming we were doing too before.
Right. Yes. Probability farming was, I roll and everyone uses it.
Yep.
This is I roll and then I divide these and I'll use these and you use those.
Yep. And you could also use those too if you use your ability.
Yeah.
So nothing is ever truly completely off limits.
Yeah, but I guess that's where the interaction comes from, right?
Right.
As opposed to everyone doing the same thing, the active players deciding how to split things up.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Did you guys say your takeaways?
No, I haven't.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's-
We have takeaways. I have takeaways for sure.
So I guess I think my takeaway actually is something we haven't talked about, the scoring.
Oh, sure.
3 of the 5 categories just involve looking at
The score.
looking at the score. Yeah, like you advance up a track by checking off the boxes, and then you just read the score off the rightmost box, and it's very fast. And then the bottom 2 tracks. Or when I say tracks, I'm referring to colors, like the bottom
the
2
purple and the
categories,
orange.
the
Yep.
purple and orange, require you to do addition, which is tedious. And I guess my takeaway is that being able to read stuff off tracks for the final score is great. It makes things so fast. Like if you can get away with that, as opposed to having to count up a bunch of individual things, if you can just say, okay, here's where I am on the track, that's how many points I get. That is really good, because that makes the final scoring so much easier.
For sure. And I also feel that's part of the conversation with the orange and purple, which, you add up your score. I like those because when you're playing, that means you don't want to put low numbers into them. Purple is like oxymoronic a little bit because you want to start low so that you can put in more after it without having to hit a 6.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to be able to, okay, that gives me a 6 here. That's a lot more points than a 2. So I really want to get the 6 in orange here instead. But yeah, you don't want to have, especially every color, be additive or multiplicative.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones, I played the other ones on my phone. They actually do multiplication and subtraction in the same one, but then you just you mark the score after you finish those 2 and you move on to the next one. So you can actually procedurally do it, but then you can end up with negative numbers. It just kind of gets a little funky. So I like this version a lot more because of those. The 2 are straight. You read the number. Yellow is you may add a couple of columns together,
But they're like big numbers.
1 or 2, 3 numbers, 4 numbers at most.
Yeah.
If you really focus on yellow.
And 2 of them are multiples of 10.
Right, exactly. Right. So, very easy to add those other 3 or get those other 3 on the score sheet. I do like having some, though, where you have ability to control how many points you get. So, a little bit of math I like, but also not everyone likes math. So, I'm an accountant
over here.
I'm an accountant.
He doesn't mind adding numbers.
I like adding numbers together, especially if they get to higher numbers.
Yeah.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
So, my takeaway, I think for games like this specifically, you really want to have interplay between the colors. So if you have a restriction of you can only use this die for this section, then I want to be able to get other things in other sections with that section so that I can diversify and get more interesting combos happening. Because really, I think the combos are what make roll and writes really shine. If it's just math numbers, that's pretty boring.
Yeah.
So being able to then you add this over here, or you could add this over here. Oh man, that's a great idea. I really want blue. Let's focus on blue right now, and you just really play with it.
You're saying having different interactions between the different areas.
Exactly. Yeah. Being able to, and how purple is very bonus heavy, but really hard to add numbers to.
Yeah.
Which
So-
and I think that's important because that's a common trope in roll and writes, is having different scoring areas.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but in this one, it's cool that the colors really have a different character.
Yeah.
Because, I mentioned quicks, they have different colors, but they're essentially all the same feel. But each color feels really different in this game.
Yeah, blue is always with white, and so you're always checking that white die with the blue die to just see how they're working together. Maybe you want to keep one of them and re-roll the other, or you can play with it a lot more. Yeah, I like that
I feel like
characterization a lot too.
And I feel like they could easily put a theme on this
Oh
game
yeah,
of you're adventuring out in these different areas or something. It doesn't need it necessarily, but
but would that still be clever?
it would be. I don't know what it would be, but it with a feel of there's this color is this and that.
Right.
This would lend itself more to a theme than some other more generic color.
So I was playing so many of these games over the past couple of weeks that I decided to start trying to design one, and I'm literally doing that right now, where I'm like, okay, what do the different colors mean? And
okay.
yeah,
Nice.
so we'll see if I actually finish it or get
okay.
it playable. But yeah, there's so much here. I feel like that it's a great experience all on its own. It's very and I mean, I think I ended with 280 points, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
That's a lot of points. I normally don't like a lot of victory points in games, but in this one, it feels right to me. Because in solo mode, I've gotten 150 or 140 before. Like, oh, that's not great. And then like I've now gotten 210, 230 on my own. So it's like, oh, cool. Yeah, you can really manipulate it, really figure out the synergies and when to actually go after things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, Trevor, I want to hear from you about your game you're designing. Maybe we'll save it for our wrap-up episode.
Yeah, well, let's save it for the wrap-up.
Yeah.
Literally 24 hours in the making at the moment, so not very far into it. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That's pretty clever. And tune in next time for
Three Sisters. Dun, dun, dun.
Hey, thanks for listening to The Tabletop Takeaway. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. So please tell your friends and visit our website at thetabletoptakeaway.com, where you can suggest games and mechanics for us to cover next on the show.